May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Welcome to another Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, preserving the legacy of Shinju Suzuki and those whose paths crossed his, and anything else that comes to mind. I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable, free from economic hardship, and able to get out and do whatever it is you want within the limitations of the universal precept of do as little harm as possible. So we have a guest for today's podcast, Jed Linde, who showed up at Zen Center in the late 60s, and then you'll learn what happened before that and what happened after that with him. So after we've had our pause to meditate, we'll just give Jed a call and see what he has to say. So when you hear the bell, hit pause if you want, and meditate or whatever for as long as you want. And when you're ready to come back, just hit unpause, and we'll be there to end our meditation and hit the bell and begin the phone chat with Jed Linde.
Hello.
Good morning, Jed.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Yeah, how you doing?
Pretty good. Before I forget, I want to let you know that besides feeling pretty good about you wanting to have a conversation with me, this is the first time I've spoken to somebody in another day. So I was wondering how Tuesday was, being it's still Monday here.
Tuesday is turning out pretty good. It's nice and cool. The garden was happy this morning, so it's looking pretty good. How's Monday doing for you?
Well, it's a beautiful day here, what I call plumbago blue skies, and kind of spoiled in Salinas, temperature sort of goes between 60 and 70 all year round with a few variations.
Is that right?
Yeah, we're,
wow.
10 miles from the bay, and if it gets hot, it gets hotter down at the other end of the valley, so it pulls in breezes, cool breezes, and foggy in the morning, but it burns off by noon. So.
I've lived in Carmel Valley not long, and there was fog every morning that was pretty heavy, but it stopped right before where we were. So I guess your fog comes from somewhere else, of course.
Well, it all comes in from from Monterey Bay. It goes down the Salinas Valley or goes down the Carmel Valley.
Right, right.
We lived there for 18 years, and two more at Jamesburg, so that's 20. Jamesburg had the 4 seasons, which was nice. And
yeah.
Anyway,
well,
do you have a theme or a topic?
No, I just sort of wing it. First, I'd like to know just what you're up to right now, how it's going there, and then you can talk about anything you want. I'd like to hear about your book, 3 Charles Stories, which I really enjoyed, and so did Katrina.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I will
Yeah.
share with you that I have gotten feedback. I was just reflecting on that today from people who know me at different periods of my life, and from people who don't know me. And I was sort of toying in the back of my mind with what was better and what was worse. But I will share one humorous thing with you with somebody I knew during the years in Mexico City who wrote that he enjoyed the book, and but then reminded me of several different vignettes and situations that he thought I should have included in the book, which I won't go into details, but under no circumstances would I have included them. But anyway, so I don't know if this is a first, but this is the first time I know of somebody criticizing what was not in a book as opposed to what was in it. What am I doing? That's something else, and it's an interesting question because I was, from a different angle, was thinking about it today. Monday is wash day, and did 3 loads of wash and other. Made breakfast. Maria makes lunch. And
how's she doing?
Well, the hours of time do not slow down, and arthritis has really taken a toll. So, it's not as mobile as she would like to be, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, what I was reflecting on is that I'm sort of the Jukido of Catalina Avenue, and doing cleaning and stuff like that, gardening, and that's good. I mean, I've been doing that since we bought the house 26 years ago. So before that in Carmel Valley, although it certainly at a lower octave because Maria was active and I had the practice and stuff like that.
Incidentally, congratulations on, is this true? 61 years of marriage?
Yes. February will be 62.
Wow. Pretty good. Yeah, I admire that.
It's as I was either musing or mentioning to somebody the other day, when you start talking in half centuries, you know you're getting old. I mean,
it's yeah.
Well, I have to. I don't know if it's how important it is, but
everything is equally important.
62 years as just a number. I don't have any sense of it being long or short. Or Same thing with my career as a psychotherapist, 40 years, and
wow.
Yeah. And
that's really something.
I retired 7 years ago. So, just a slight digression. It could be a huge one, but
that's fine. All digressions welcome.
As you may or may not know, I left Jamesburg in July of '76, and we left. And in October, I got my first counseling job as part of the staff opening a outpatient heroin detoxification clinic in Salinas, the first one I had here. And after about 1.25 years, I was promoted to chief counselor. and was given the task of opening 2 satellite clinics in Soledad and King City, which was really ironic because on one of the town trips from Tasahara, we went to get manure or something in Greenfield.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, my God, I hope I never end up in this place, you know. Anyway, I was at a general staff meeting, and I was looking around, and the agency had a residential program. It had another detox in Seaside, and they had a counseling center in Monterey, and each one had a chief counselor, and they all had master's degrees and licenses, and I only had a BA. And I suddenly thought, I've got to go back to school. I've got to get a master's. I'm going to be stuck because I'll never get a job someplace. I mean, this was so fortuitous, mostly because I was bilingual, fluently bilingual. I was the only bilingual counselor on staff. And anyway, I went back and forth on it, and this, you can see some connection here in the conversation. But I thought, you know, you could be doing this for another 25 years. It turned out to be much longer than that, but anyway, I thought it's worth the investment. You know, this is what I want to do. I found my calling, and it coincides with actually a Zazen experience in Green Gulch during a session, and so I started looking. You know, I'm working in Salinas, living in Carmel Valley. I'm looking at master's degree programs, and there aren't much. Monterey County, you know. 1978 was not the fulcrum of educational opportunities, and there was Chapman College, and I talked to the coordinator. There was Antioch, and I talked to them, and I was enrolled in Antioch. And a week before I was going to start, I saw this ad in the paper for University Without Walls. And I had just, you know, synchronicity. I had just read an article, page article in Newsweek about University Without Walls, where Yehudi Menuhin was a tutor for a student, and it was a very advanced program, and had a lot of self-responsibility involved in it, and so on and so forth. And so I called up the number, and you'll appreciate this. After a few minutes of talking back and forth with the coordinator, he suddenly sort of stopped, took a deep breath, and said, "You're Jed Linde." And I'm
No
like,
kidding.
What? And it was David Schwartz.
Wow.
He was a coordinator.
David Schwartz.
Yeah.
Wow, you remember who David Schwartz is, you know?
Well, I mean, he was somebody, I became pretty good friends with him. He came in quite a few times during the summer, and I'd bump into him and talk to him, and I met his wife, June, and...
Yeah. I remember her, too. I mentioned them, within the last half year to Ed Brown.
I listened to the Ed Brown, and that's why I wrote down David Schwartz, thinking we might touch upon that. And anyway, it was wonderful. I was able to integrate the whole master's degree program with my work, and my clinical supervisor became my tutor, and voila. And anyway.
Because I took firewood to their home. He would take wood that wasn't split because he wanted to split it.
Well, that's my experience there with the University with Walls is a whole story in itself. But another sort of segue.
Let me say something that occurs to me right there.
Sure.
You know, after Katrina reads a lot. I basically just read stuff that has to do with the work I'm doing, you know. And then I read your book because I know you, and we were going to be talking and stuff. It was very easy to read. I was glad. And Katrina, you know, I had to coax her into reading it because she just reads all, you know, she didn't know what it was. And she really enjoyed it. And she said, tell him to write more. It doesn't matter what you write about, you know. I think you could write about all this stuff. You could write about your life, but you got a nice style. It's direct. It's not self-conscious. It's not trying to be a writer. You know what I mean? It was just good. Anyway, that's how I felt, and that's how she felt.
Well, no,
and her
you.
opinion's more important than mine.
No, it's I do have a magnum opus that I'm working on that I hope to move on with at some point. But that's not the segue I had in mind. In your conversation with Ed Brown, in fact, one of the reasons that I listened to that one in particular was that it had a topic mention of ghosts, and
Yes.
I thought that I wanted to hear about if it was his experience or whatever. And I don't know if are you aware of what went on with Maria and I?
Please enlighten me. I do remember something, but I need details.
Well, it segues into a series of related kind of information. But I wish we had time. I could go into all of what went on to actually get to Tassajara. But we arrived there in April, I believe, or maybe just after May 1st, because I believe it was already guest season when we got there, and it was our first.
Of what year?
1969. And I started sitting at Berkeley in 67 and started going over to San Francisco in 68. And I hadn't been around that long, and there was some concern, and they would only allow us to go for 2 weeks, especially because it was a family and so on and so forth. And I wanted to stay longer. And there were quite a few impediments before that. They condemned the building that we were living in. And anyway, to make a long story short, we ended up storing all our belongings in the basement of a friend in Berkeley. And so now we could stay longer, and whoever the authorities were at Sokoji, they said, no, 2 weeks, that's it. So I said, okay, and you may enjoy this. On our way down there, we had Lucille Harris in the station wagon with us.
Yeah.
And she never stopped talking from the Berkeley Zen all the way into Tassajara. I mean,
My God.
And it was one story after another about people failing as students at Zen Center and at Tassajara. Anyway, when we arrived, I went over to talk to the director, who was Tim Buckley, and said hello. And I said, I want to sit all 5 days. I don't want to be a part-time or a guest student or whatever. I want to be a Tassajara student. And there was a pause while he just looked at me sort of dumbfounded. He said, and before that, by the way, I need one more digression. I had spoken to Mel and said, it's really kind of frustrating. I've gone through all this crap with my house and belongings, and I really want to be able to stay there longer, and they're not budging. And apparently he talked to Yvonne, and after a lecture one day in Sokoji, she walked up to me and literally slammed me up against the wall and had her nose against my nose and screaming in my face that who the fuck did I think I was going to Mel? Mel was the last person on earth you would want to talk to because he said that he would never be Richard Baker's student. And don't you know we're all behind Richard Baker and blah, 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 blah. And I was literally in shock. I mean, it was just like I had never been physically attacked by a woman in the first place, and it was like within the confines of Sokoji. And anyway, you'll understand why I digressed with that.
Yvonne could do that, and then she could turn around and be very helpful. You know, I mean, she was mercurial.
Yeah, well, that was one Yvonne experience. But anyway, the reason I added it is that Buckley said, well, I'll have to call San Francisco and ask Yvonne, you know, and I thought, well, that's it, you know, forget about it. The short version of that is that we were there till December. And
what month did you arrive?
Probably May.
Yeah, I was there then.
Yeah, and the last training period was Suzuki Roshi and the family training period. Anyway, going back to, they had us sit one day and then we sat the other 4. But after about a month or so, we got Jikido duties, and then you can see how this all sort of fits in with some of the stuff that I've been running around in between loads of washing. But I did the Jikido duties, and I was still having a hard time with the schedule. I mean, I had been a desk jockey for most of my life, and this was like boot camp on steroids or something, and I was in a deep, deep sleep the next night when Maria was Jikido. And around midnight, I was awakened by Maria kneeling on my chest, screaming at the top of her lungs. And it was quite a scintillating experience. Anyway, I finally got her sort of down to she had encountered a ghost in the Sendo. And I don't know how this all worked out, but I ended up going back to complete the night there with Chris Miller. I don't know whether all I can think of is maybe I wanted to witness if we encountered the ghost. But it was there was always white noise in the Zendo there from the creek.
Yeah.
You know, at least for me, and it was on like 4 or 5 higher octaves, and that was the only thing that we noticed. It was, I didn't sleep at all. I mean, it was just like, wow. But Maria experienced the footsteps and felt the aisle giving down with each step. And then what really freaked her out was that the so-called ghost started in a wailing chant up at the altar.
And this is 69.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I've heard, you know, this is not an isolated story.
Oh, I know. I got into it, so to speak, because Maria stayed ill. I mean, it really got to her. And
I think she wouldn't do Jikido anymore after that.
I would not be surprised. I don't actually remember that, but in any case, I don't know if I consulted with Katagiri or somebody else did, but Katagiri said there's nothing to worry about. It's more or less said it's not something threatening. You know, it's not to be concerned about. And I called Ann Armstrong. I know you know Ann Armstrong, and
Yeah.
asked her about it. And she did a reading in which she said that yes, indeed, there were what she referred to as des carnets at Tassajara, and that they were positive. They added to the spiritual energy of the environment there, and that certainly were not a negative or something to be afraid of.
Mm-hmm.
And later that summer, I mean, this became a kind of Tassajara topic, by the coffee machine. It sort of would come up. And there was a guest there with his son, and I have no memory of how this came up. And it might have been just him talking about it. But anyway, he was living in Hawaii, and he started talking about the poltergeist activity in his home, where things were breaking and falling off the wall, and furniture was being moved around. And
in Hawaii?
Yeah. And one day he was driving along. I think he said he had a convertible, and his son was about 10, 11 years old, had his head sort of lying asleep on his shoulder. And he was thinking about, my God, how can I protect my son from this, And out of the blue, the son starts talking. And he says, Dad, all they come for is love. All you have to do is offer them some love and tell them to take what they need, but don't take it all. And apparently the son could see them. And once he did that, everything became quiet. I'm trying to think of, there was another student who saw a bright light while in Chiquito. It looked like it was daylight, and it was the middle of the night.
Ron Leva.
And then I heard a variation of the Beck story.
Yeah.
That was different from the one that Ed talked about. And that was, and I don't know who I heard that from. I don't know if it was from one of the Becks. Anyway, we had contact with them after we moved to Carmel Valley. But the version I heard was that they were snowed in. I don't remember them mentioning who else was there, but there were a couple of other people. And it was late in the evening, and they were just sitting around having a glass of wine or something like that. And there was a knock on the door. And the next morning at breakfast, one of them said, "There was a knock on the door last night there, wasn't it?" And everybody said yes. And then one of them asked, "Well, what happened next?" And not one of them could remember what happened afterward.
Well, that's this Bob told me that's the experience they had the next morning, he said, but eventually they started remembering. And I've got that story is on Cuke.com. It's got the way Ed told it. But I remember how Bob told it. And although once I thought he said they were with the Schwartzes there. But
that might have been. I think they were friends.
Another time, I thought he said they were with the caretaker. I can't remember which person that was.
Crazy Bob or something like that.
They remembered quite a bit. And
well, you talk about the one-legged man and the
right.
car driving off, and
right. Yeah, asking where's the road out of here, and I think I remember a red beard or something, and then Bob said, "Well, you got to go back the way you came." And saw a car up there. It seemed to be running and with lights. But when they went up to check, after it left, there were no tracks leading out. And, and then Dick Baker said something like, he'd met that man or something. I didn't know what he was. I didn't get more than that out of him. I remember that.
Well, one of my minor epiphanies is that we're the ghosts. We're the ones with a sheet over us. And the irony of ironies, we depict ghosts as having a sheet over them.
So Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah.
I feel like I've blabbed a lot.
No.
Life
This is excellent. I'm so happy you told that. No, this is your job now. You're in terms of like what you call way-seeking mind story. When did you start getting some inclination that I have some idea because I've read your book, but that there was more to life than what you were being told, and the common assumptions of people around you and everything.
Well, mine was pretty well defined, and I'll try to make it as brief as possible. I took high school psychology and thought, wow, this is interesting, and took a couple of freshman courses in psychology and took a sociology course, and in the first week, the professor said, you can either write a term paper or you can do community service. And if you do community service at Los Angeles General Psychiatric Hospital, you automatically get an A.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so my hand went up, and so did a Korean War vet, David Sanchez, and who would play a role in my life. And we went over there once a week for 4 hours, and it was, among other things, one of the most disheartening experiences of my life.
Yeah, how so?
Well, there were people stumbling down hallways who had had lobectomies or lobotomies, and there were individuals who were being released, put back out, that to me, I mean, I couldn't understand. They were not even marginal. And there were people who seemed fairly functional, and in terms of what I saw in the 4 hours on the ward, and they were being sent off to long-term placements in psychiatric hospitals. And I completely, what I ended up with was, is there a objective yardstick of mental health? Is there something that is non-relativistic, that denotes whether somebody is mentally healthy, average, unhealthy, so on and so forth? And I stayed with that question. David Sanchez graduated a year before me, and he went to Mexico City College, now the University of Americas, as an anthropology student, and I didn't know anything about it. Anyway, I graduated, and there's a whole series of things that went on at that point where I did not. My parents moved to Newport Beach. Nearest school was Long Beach State. I went over there, looked at it. It looked like my junior high school in terms of the architecture and atmosphere. And I decided to go to work, and I ended up working on Project Mercury. I was working on the valves that separate the sections of the rockets, and
Wow.
I did that for 6 months. We were working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I was living at home, and I had a lot of money. And suddenly had this epiphany of, I could go to Mexico City College. I'd been there 3 years earlier when I was 18 and had a horrible experience. Ran out of money, couldn't speak Spanish, and barely survived it. But I loved Mexico City. It was beautiful. I mean, the architecture and the way the stores were. I mean, it was just. I didn't realize that the Paseo de la Reforma is based on the Champs-Élysées, and but it's this magnificent boulevard with gloriettas, circles with statues, and so on and so forth. So I decided, I really didn't. I mean, that was not a fair experience. I'm gonna go there. I applied and moved down there in August of '59, I guess it was, and found out that there was cheaper living up the road from the school was about 10 miles out of Mexico City on the Mexico-Toluca Highway, and I actually walked all over this little town, adobe walls, tile roofs, looking for a place to rent, and couldn't find anything, and was moaning about it in Spanish class one day, and one of the guys there said, well, I got a house up there, and the other people that moved out, you can share it with me, and bingo. It's $10 a month rent for a 4-room house. That was my share. I mean, that was,
Yeah.
And anyway, I hadn't been there 2 days when this neighbor came over, and I was sweeping up all the roaches and other debris that was on the
What type of roaches?
I couldn't understand that last thing you said, David. Anyway, he looked at me and he said, well, it looks like there's some improvement here. And I laughed. And anyway, it was Richard Crowley who lived a block away.
Oh, my gosh. Huh.
And at some point, I don't know how long, much later, over at his house was kind of the meeting place on weekends. I mentioned to him about, that I was wanting to, I was searching for a non-relativistic description of mental health, I guess, something like that. And he said, well, you might want to look at this. And he threw a book at me across the room, and it was Zen Buddhism by D.T. Suzuki.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time I had read the outline, I thought, this is it. This is what I've been looking for, something that's related to nature, not to a one country or ethnic group or culture or community or whatever. Anyway, it went on from there. The site department at the college were all disciples of Eric Fromm, who had his analytic institute in Mexico City. And D.T. Suzuki had been there the year before and actually even lectured at Mexico City College. And there's a book out, or you probably know about it, Zen and Psychoanalysis.
Yes,
published
with Richard D. Martino. Yeah.
And so I got a BA in Freudian psychoanalysis, essentially, is what. And with a Zen sort of influence, because just the whole faculty had been influenced by their contact with D.T. Suzuki and so on. There's a coda to that, which is, I don't know whether it's not humorous. It was rather painful for me at the time, but fast forward 1965, I'd been working for some time as a journalist, Mexico City, and columnist. I had a couple of columns in the newspaper. And I got a letter from Crowley from Japan. He'd gone to Japan, and that was one of my obsessions, was that, like, he'd gone to Japan, and I had to go, it's like I needed to follow in his footsteps and start practicing there and all that sort of stuff. And anyway, he said Philip Kapleau was about to, quote-unquote, graduate, and he was looking for a place to start a center, and maybe Mexico City would be a good place. And he put me in contact with him, and Crowley also suggested I get together, a group of people, and I contacted the professors, and pretty soon had, I don't know, about 10 or 12 different people who were interested.
Mm-hmm.
And Kapleau's book was just coming out, Three Pillars of Zen.
Did it really?
Yeah, it must have been pre-publication or whatever. Anyway,
wow.
He airmailed me a copy, and I didn't think I'd ever get it with the Mexican mails, but I did. And I was kind of blown away just reading the first section of it, Yasutani's lectures. And he wrote me then that he was going to be in Texas on a book tour, and that would be a less expensive way to get him to Mexico City so he could meet with the group. And so I contacted everybody and explained all of that to them, and then fatefully suggested, I really do think it would be good if we all got together and sat. I mean, you can laugh at this one. We sat one period of Zazen together so we wouldn't look like complete fools when he showed up. And I'm not exaggerating. I never heard from any of them again. So the whole thing just evaporated.
Yeah, because what D.T. Suzuki wrote and what Alan Watts wrote had almost no mention of Zazen or practice or what to do. It was just realizing things.
Yeah, well, it was, I think, more, sipping some green tea or sake and appreciating haiku or looking at a scroll, and practice was not part of the equation.
Yeah. Yeah. They were essential. Oh, that's very interesting. As I recall, Fromm was lived in Cuernavaca, and
yeah, he did.
There was stuff happening in Cuernavaca. I lived in Mexico City in '65, and I went to the University of the Americas, but I didn't get as much out of it. I mean, I spent a lot of time speaking Spanish because I enjoyed that, but I took too much speed, and I smoked too much pot. I didn't take speed all the time, but any amount over just a little tiny bit is too much. But I really enjoyed it, and I loved Mexico City. I was there over a year, and probably we ran into each other and said hello at one point and forgot it or something. Big city.
You saw Crowley in '65?
No, I never met him. I met Margaret, his sister. Oh, she came to Zen Center maybe 68 or 67, 8, 9. I don't know. But, I can remember her coming, and I remember hearing about him. And then Ejo Takata.
Yeah.
You knew Ejo Takata, right?
Yeah, we sat with him a couple of times during visits to Mexico City. Yeah, Crowley apparently facilitated him coming there, and
he was out of Myoshinji or Daitoku, not Daitokuji, out of Myoshinji, I guess, where Mumon Yamada was. There were other temples Mumon Yamada was associated with, but that Mumon Yamada, that lineage, right?
Well, you know, I don't know, were you in San Francisco when Yamada Mumon came to visit?
Yeah. That was later. That was like 72, because Dick Baker was enamored with him.
Well, Maria really felt a strong, resonance with him and wanted. They were going to have a session in Mexico City, and with Ajo Tecata, and I said, okay, why don't you go? Take care of Monica in the house and stuff. I was not that enamored. Tecata was, I don't really have anything to compare with, but he definitely is what I would call Rensai in terms of the sort of Marine boot camp approach in the jungle. And anyway, Maria had a horrible time.
At this session?
Yeah, it was completely disorganized. They didn't have any meals. They had to go find some place where they could buy some food. And she was very disheartened by the time she came back.
Well, I got to know a lot of those people, because I lived in Japan 4 years next door to a temple in Okayama, Sogenji, where the abbot was Yamada's last Dharma heir, Harada Shodo. And he was the most, he wasn't, they were very strict, and they were what I call running to enlightenment, running to get enlightenment and all eager and all that. But he was very nice. He did not allow people to abuse each other. He kicked the head monk out for hitting somebody, and kicked a Japanese monk out for like that. And Priscilla Durant, Chisan, was Harada's translator, and she was Yamada's translator. I bet she was Yamada's translator in Mexico City for that. But I don't know if she went back that far. No, I don't think she went back that far. And Judith, what's her name? Weaver.
Judith Weaver?
Isn't that her name, Judith Weaver? I did a podcast with her. She quite likely might have been in Mexico City for that, because she brought, Richard Crowley had her bring Ajo to Mexico City, or assist him, go later and assist him for a while. No, I think Crowley brought Ajo Tecata. I think Crowley escorted Ajo Tecata to Mexico City, and then Judith came and helped. She didn't stay a long time, but I've always thought of Richard Crowley as, it's sort of, I don't know much about him, and it just seemed like this pivotal person for a while that was not involved with, he was way out on other, there were things linking him, there were strings from Zen Center to him, but I don't think he ever came to Zen Center. I don't remember meeting him. Well, I'll get hold of Margaret.
He did.
He did?
He came in 72, 73.
Oh, really?
While we were there, and stayed at our house, and he met with Richard Baker.
Wow.
And after he met with Richard Baker, we were talking, and he said, well, I don't think there's anything for me here. And I sort of got him to elaborate, and he said, well, I think the only way I can describe it, I wasn't Buddhist enough for Baker. And
Ha 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 ha. Well, yeah. There's a thing in Japan called N. Sometimes go in, like honorable N, which means, chemistry or karmic tie or
Yeah.
and so people in Japan will not tend to say, "Oh, he's not a good teacher." They'll say, "No, we didn't have N." You know.
You didn't resonate with that
Yeah, that's
person?
right. 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 I wonder if I met him. I just don't remember this. I think I would remember. But 72, 73. I mean, in 73, I was Dick's main G-shot. So maybe I just forget it. But I also was work leader at Green Gulch, so.
And I asked you earlier, not during this conversation, but if you'd gotten any news about him or Margaret.
No, I really need to get hold of Margaret. It takes me time, I try to do too much, so it's very hard for me to get to things. The lists. It's not like one list. There are various lists, and they're all too long. And I really want to get hold of Shakti. I think she's in Boulder.
So she's not with Jeff Sherman.
No, Jeff's married with somebody else, and Jeff has been sitting with. Has he been
Pat
sitting?
Phelan
Pat Phelan
in North Carolina.
Yeah, right. But they did leave the Bay Area together. Just briefly with Ejo Takada, what I've read and heard about him, several things. Apparently he came to the opening of Tassajara Zen Mountain Center, Zen Shinji, opening ceremony on like July 3rd or something, 4th, 1967, and came in and gave Suzuki a Kyosaku, which Rinzai calls Keisaku. It's the stick. Yeah. And it had written on it something, which I have in, I'm working on a thing called Tassajara Stories. I have that, and it's on Cuke. All the drafts are on Cuke.com. And I think he walked over the road to get there.
That's what I heard. Yeah, and he was on those wooden, whatever they are called.
Oh, was he Borengeta? Oh, my God. Oh, wooden clogs. Like,
yeah.
Oh, my God. That seems impossible. Oh. Wow. Where did you hear that?
I really don't know.
I think I heard that. But I don't remember. I didn't know that. I mean, I was there and I tended to meet everybody. And I think he just did that and walked out.
Well,
I don't know, though. Maybe he was at the ceremony. I would assume he'd stay for the ceremony. But he wasn't there long, or I would remember, because I'd heard about him.
Well, the story goes, and this is in one of their publications.
Oh.
There is a Ejo Takada sort of book that one of the future members of the Zen group there saw him walking in downtown Mexico City and started a conversation with him, and that's how the center was formed.
Mm.
So anyway, I mean, I have no idea how he would have been able to. Couldn't quite see him hitchhiking, but anyway.
Yeah, it's almost like a ghost story. Since, I never met him, I didn't know about it at the time. So, but wait, the last we left you because some of these asides are so interesting. You were in Mexico City, and then uh, you know you got interested in Zen. How did you end up getting to the San Francisco Zen Center?
Well, I was building a kind of a journalistic, I don't know if empire is the right word, but you kind of, uh, I never had a full-time job. I had two columns in the newspaper. I was a stringer for a news service up in California. I had learned how to do all the layout and put together any part of the newspaper and write the headlines and translate stories from Spanish into English because the news, the English language newspaper. And then I got a call from the Time correspondent. This is 1967, and invited me over to his office. And I don't know who it was who had moved on, but he wanted me to become his backup for Time magazine in Mexico City,
Mm.
and which would be pretty active because he was covering the whole Caribbean and Central America.
Mm-hmm.
And I had one of these moments where it was like, I can take this, which I did, and then I had my moment of, if I go with this, I'm in. This is what I'm going to be doing from now on. And I really wanted to practice Zen.
Wow.
And I decided we were going to go to Japan.
Mm.
And I resigned from everything. And we went up to Southern California where my parents were and bought a station wagon. And I had friends in Berkeley who had visited us in Coahuilpa, so we went and stayed with them. And Dwight Way, it was like 10 blocks away or something like that.
Mm. Berkeley Zen Center. 10-minute walk, 20-minute walk. Mm.
It sounds easy, but it wasn't. I was in no shape for sitting zazen at that point, but I started all the same.
So, how did it work out?
Well, I didn't realize that I was arriving just at the beginning of the Berkeley Zendo. I thought I might have been there for a long time. That's a whole story in itself, but less than a year later, I was studying Sesshin and Sokoji. So.
Mm. Mm.
Still in kind of shock that this was actually happening.
Mm. Mm.
I was in, I would add that I was in extreme acculturation mode. I had been at least in the journalism world and in parts of Mexico City society, sort of a big fish or medium-sized fish in a big lake, and went from that to nobody. And also I was really unhappy about not being in Mexico City, which I really loved.
Mm.
Cosmopolitan. I mean, it was just like every day there was something happening that was interesting and new, and
Yeah.
so it was. I didn't realize I was adjusting, but definitely maladapted for about a year at least.
Well, I remember you as being very solid and dependable and good at what you did and really good with dealing with problems with guests, really good in the office and very fair, soft-spoken, but you were large and formidable and was great with difficult people.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I think I ended up being branded as a difficult person at Zen Center, but
Maybe at another level, but not from, well, you and I were pretty close. I didn't, all groups have what I call a reading on the cult meter, and it goes up and down, and they tend to gravitate toward groupthink. So if somebody's sort of independent in a way that irritates the group think, yeah, you might say they're, an irritant to the group. But Zen Center accepted. I mean, it didn't kick people out who were not towing the company line.
well, I'll share with you one brief anecdote at the Berkeley Zendo.
Yeah.
Richard Baker came to visit, and I had never seen him. I'd heard about him a lot. And I was really looking forward to it. I thought, wow, this is the guy who has been chosen by Suzuki Roshi, and he speaks English. Yeah, I was really enthused, to hear him and meet him. And he came in, sat down, and started talking, and I almost fainted. I mean, I had this, I don't know, whatever you can call it. It wasn't I wasn't thinking, but I had an immediately profound negative resonance with Richard Baker. It was like, oh, this guy is just a clever, opportunistic politician, is what it seemed like. He was talking about what we were going to do when Suzuki Roshi died, and I was like, died? It was like, it was pretty crass, it seemed like. And anyway, I put that aside, and this was, give it more time, deal with it. But unfortunately, it continued that way. And
yeah, you had bad end with him. But you stuck around. Mel was certainly opposite. How'd you what was that word? How'd you grok with Mel?
Not very well. No, Mel, I don't know what the story was, but he was frequently sarcastic with me. That was his mode of communication.
He became pretty mellow, pretty easy to get along with, and yeah, I forget, that. Because I stayed in touch with Mel. I did like 3 podcasts with him pretty long before he died last year. Well, what do you remember about Shunryu Suzuki?
Oh, I don't really want to talk about that, David.
Well, anything else you want to talk about vis-a-vis Zen Center, Tassajara, Green Gulch, all that? No need. We've gone quite long.
Yeah. Well, the last 2 years at Zen Center were at Jamesburg, and I had no idea how tired I was until we left.
Mm.
It took me several months to recover.
That's a big job, running Jamesburg. You all did a good job. You have a strong sense of responsibility.
Well, what is the saying? You can't see the mountain when you're on the mountain. You have to go 50 kilometers away and turn around and look back.
Yeah.
So after we left, I could see it.
Yeah.
More of it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, I definitely have bent your ear, and it's a pleasure, David. And it seems, how long has it been?
Well, I remember visiting you in Salinas a couple of times in your home, and I remember I made a table for you.
Well, you did that in San Francisco.
No, I was at Green Gulch when I made the table. Oh, maybe you were in San Francisco.
This was in 72, 73.
I made that at Green Gulch in 73. And I remember seeing it in your home in Salinas.
Been with us all the way. Thanks again. Lovely table.
Oh, that is cool.
And with some linseed oil, I mean, it's beautiful.
Huh. Yeah, I spent a lot of time doing stuff like that. That was fun. And the first tables I made were before the first practice period at Tassar. It was like the first thing I'd ever made. And I made them from hollow core doors. And I made one for Cobancino and one for Suzuki. And the last time I was at Tassar, which was like 9 years ago, they were still there in the Abbott's cabin, both of them.
That's beautiful.
And they were made, I'd get Paul Disco to advise me. One of them, it's too hard to, I got like some like really hard, like that dark redwood for the sides. I would attach it to the sides. And then it was hard for me to make the corners. So I just cut the corners off so they didn't have to meet perfectly. I did that on one of them. On the other one, I actually joined the corners. But that was fun. Hey, what I wanted to ask you about something else. Were you in Mexico City when the student unrest happened? That people were certainly talking about that when I was there. And I was in some really big left-wing demonstrations there.
I'll talk about that, but first I want to go back. Do you remember what year it was when you came? You came with your son to visit here in Salinas? I'm guessing he was around 12.
Yeah.
Like that.
All right. Let me guess. Maybe 20 years ago?
Yeah, that's what I guessed.
That would be my younger son, Clay, who's 30 now. Kelly's 48, or going to be 48 next month. Yeah, and I enjoyed seeing you and Maria. And well, tell me what Monica's doing, your daughter. She was always so bright and neat.
Oh, boy. Monica has fulfilled our family motto of lifelong learning. She graduated in UC Davis in biology or biological sciences. Went to nursing school, became an RN, became an OR nurse. She was actually recruited out of school because she seemed like a natural, and she did that for about 12 years. Married a doctor, and has two sons, and along the way got a degree in mechanical engineering and a master's degree in industrial engineering, and she's the lab manager for a orthopedic lab at the University of Pittsburgh, which has a couple of robots, and so she's able to use all of her experience and learning where they're taking about cadavers and checking joints and
wow.
Mexico City, there was more to the departure song or whatever of leaving there in '67. The quality of life, as far as I was concerned, had gone down beyond measure.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you were there, so you know that they dug up, instead of tunneling, they dug up the main boulevards to put the metro in, and I used to be able to walk down to the Reforma from our apartment, and I'd be down in downtown at the newspaper office on Balderas in 10 minutes, max.
Yeah.
That became an hour, and I lowered it to 45 minutes by walking. It was just, I mean, it was just one constant traffic jam, and I had a job where I had to move around in the city, and
yeah, people with glasses would have to be wiping the smog off their glasses periodically.
Well, I finally at one point, you know how you can sort of get sick and then you just sort of forget about it, and you know.
Mm-hmm. I
started charting it on a calendar, and I was getting a respiratory infection once a month.
Oh, it's sad.
And Monica was getting sick, and we just didn't have the antibodies for it, whatever. So there was a lot of, I mean, it was just, to me, and the influx of people, I mean, it just transformed the whole city. I mean, it just was coming in thousands every week because all the jobs that were opening up. Mm-hmm. For people who were losing their jobs to mechanization in the farm areas, and there was a lot of general labor jobs, and they were filling them, and shanty towns in all directions on the outskirts of Mexico City.
Yeah.
We've gone back quite a few times, by the way. Haven't been back in 7 or 8 years. But, before that,
Does Maria go back to see family?
Yeah.
Yeah. And where is her family in Mexico City?
There's a nephew and 2 nieces, maybe a few others here and there. Everybody else has passed away.
You know, my only remaining relative in Texas is the governor. that I know of.
Is this the guy who's saying no mask and no vax, or is that I have him confused with a different?
Well,
governor?
he got COVID recently. He and I don't really know each other. My mother knew him, and I remember seeing him when he was a little kid. He's second cousin.
Well, I'm still going to blame you, David.
Yeah, right. It's my fault. His mother was very nice, and I loved his aunt and uncles, and Horace, Doris, and Morris. We share the same great grandmother on my mother's side, who was an interesting person. But anyway, all right. Sorry, going back to Mexico City. Hey, I remember something about Maria wanting to get out of Mexico City because she had a position she had a very high position with women's prisons. Right?
That's a long story.
Yeah.
That's just the first part of it. I'll give you a real short version of it.
Yeah.
Maria was one of 3 women who graduated out of a class of 500 in the National University Law School. That was a very difficult time for her to make it through that, with machismo and everything else. And anyway, there was. It's a long story. I mean, it's interesting. I wouldn't say that Maria was not happy about leaving Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
But she has definitely become an American citizen. So
there was. Do you remember Perry Morales?
No.
He was something like an analyst in Mexico City, around there, who came to Tasahara as a student, like in the summer. And when I was down there, God, what year was it when the government sent the tanks into the university? The
68.
68?
Yeah.
Yeah, he told me about that. And the universities in all Latin America were sacrosanct. The government couldn't.
Yeah, autonomous.
They were autonomous. The government could not enter. Like I was in Lima, and the students there, there was the communists versus the socialists, and actually they would even fight, even with guns. Very serious. But the students there stole all these city buses and brought them to the university, and the government couldn't do anything. And so Mexico City was like that, and there was serious unrest and anti-government, protests, and the government brought tanks into the university and killed students. And they now, as I recall, they even went into lower schools, and then there was this massacre down. Was that at Zocalo? I can't remember the names. There was a
Tlatelolco.
Huh?
Tlatelolco.
There was a serious massacre of many hundreds of people downtown. What do you know about that? What do you remember? Well, you weren't there then, yeah.
No, but nobody knows the true number. I mean, all the bodies were carried away at night. But they had snipers along the parade route, and then they really opened up on the demonstration. This is a big square. It's actually a triangle, but it's considered like a public gathering place. And yeah, it was pretty. That was another part of the exodus. Nationalism was, out of the galaxy. Everywhere you looked, there was a decal that said, "The eyes of the world are on Mexico," and that was. It was everything was around the Olympics, and things were done that were, ridiculous.
Oh yeah, that was it. Yeah, they wanted to have a nice Olympics, so they massacred people who might get in the way. God.
Well, they weren't going to have civil unrest while the torch was being run through the city. So
yeah. Wow. Yeah, Perry Morales really, there was some in the news about that, but he really filled me in on it, how serious it was. And I had been in that triangular square in an enormous anti-American demonstration, and there weren't a lot of gringos in the crowd, but I was holding one end of a banner which was very large with some other people that said, "Don't believe imperialist lies." Wow, and they were breaking windows, like nice storefront windows. That was 65. Yeah, I hung out with some communists, and I'd go to the Cuban embassy, and I really enjoyed the consulate there, or whatever he was. He told me to go to Cuba. He said there's no snakes.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Well, but that sort of political unrest, was that beginning to foment when you were there?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It was a combination going on all at the same time.
Well, I guess we'd better go about our days. I've really enjoyed talking with you, and I really think it's great. You had 40 years of helping people, because you were always very insightful. Because you didn't buy into, you didn't buy into believing things easily, and but you were good to people. I knew you had critical thoughts about some people, but more insightful, and you saw the good and the bad, and but when I found out you're becoming a therapist, is that what you would say, a therapist?
It's sort of a bag full of terms: counselor, psychotherapist, therapist.
Mm-hmm. Well, right about that. Yeah. So you're working on a magnum opus.
Magnum opus.
Magnum opus. Yeah. And I urge people to get 3 Charles stories by Jed Linde. Available.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's good talking to you.
It's good. Give my love to Maria and to Monica, and we'll be in touch.
Hope so.
Yeah.
Tell Katrinka thanks for her kind comments.
I will. And you actually remember there's 2 Ks in her name.
And I appreciate all the good things you've done. More than I ever could have imagined.
Oh, yeah. Well.
Take care.
Take care. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So thanks a lot, Jed Linde. Yeah, most interesting. Quite a trip. This has been a Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from sleepy Sanur with Dogge Bandita, Feline Cuchita, and dear lovely Katrinka. And we're wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.